good when you are.
We don't have agendas.
Oh, you don't have agendas. You didn't put them up there. Sorry. Would you like to use mine?
I have an agenda, it's just everybody else
Okay.
doesn't have one, so if everybody's okay with getting started without an agenda, is that all right?
Calling the shots anyway.
Do I have to use the hammer, Jen? I do.
It's protocol.
I'm calling to order the May 3rd meeting of the Polk City Parks Commission. Can you please call roll?
Roll call. Delaney.
Here.
Carson.
Here.
Reed here. Converse.
Here.
Hayland.
Here.
Bentley.
Here.
Otis.
Here.
All are present.
Attached to the email of the agenda were the board minutes from April 5th. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, it sounds like, Jenny, we have one audience participation. The person who's on the phone, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Jen Putman, 1358 12 Oaks Drive in Polk City. And just wanted to do a quick introduction. I moved to Polk City a couple of years ago, really looking for a family-friendly town, that small town feel, and then looking for a city that had a lot of growth. So the reason that I wanted to come tonight is I wanted to share feedback and really provide a holistic view because I have young children in softball, soccer, and I also have a dog. So specifically, I wanted to share some feedback related to the new recreation area that will be located next to the Polk City Intermediate School as that's being built. So my goal and the goal of so many others is really optimizing how many fields can be put in the space and then fill in other amenities where sports fields cannot go. So specifically, I'm here to share my feelings on prioritizing how those sports fields are used over the recent proposal of a dog park. So to support this, I'm going to hit on 3 main things: the current need and future need, safety, and then potential revenue opportunities. So I feel like the current need versus future need, I think we can all agree that we have an immediate need for more sports fields in Polk City, which the recreational area is proposing and will give us. So although the 2020 census information is not yet available, I believe that we'll continue to see that growth trend of Polk City go upwards and see that trend continue to escalate versus decrease. So in addition to the growth, Confluence, who's the project manager, as you know, shared with our group that the median age for Polk City residents over the last 10 years has changed from being over 50 years old to just over 30 years old. So if we need the field space now, we'll continue to need it in the future based on the population growth in the younger population moving in and having children. In addition, I wanted to talk about as we think about that growth happening with our families, that does mean that there continues to be people who have pets, but based on the amount of pet life in Polk City in the last 2 years, there were just over 200 last year and just over 100 this year. In terms of safety, I wanted to make sure that we talked about optimizing that field space within the new plot of land is going to help take the strain off the current complex. So the current complex is now to the point of being extremely unsafe due to the volume of people there and cars. In terms of parking, when the parking lot is full, which it now has been for the last few Saturdays as well as other days of the week, you physically have to back out of the narrow part of the parking lot if there are no spots available. So as you think about your children crossing the street and a car is backing out of the parking lot, how unsafe that is. It's just an extremely unsafe situation over and over again. I also want us to think about potential safety concern of mixing dog parks with sports complexes. So I know a dog park would have a fence around it, but based on the green space within Polk City, is there another option that we could have a dog park be in a place that's not mixing with sports facility? So my last point is around potential revenue opportunities for our athletic clubs. So if we had a field space needed, we could host tournaments and more games in Polk City. So I think we all know that there's a potential for revenue opportunities, not only for the sporting clubs, But if we think about all of our small businesses in town, the restaurants, convenience stores, other small boutiques, all of them would have an opportunity to generate revenue off of people coming into the city. So lastly, I just want to be really clear that I am not against the dog park and fully aware of the different options that have been put on the table in terms of the different layouts that are being proposed. But what I want to be really clear about is my feedback is making sure that we're not putting a dog park in a place that could be used as a field. So if there's a dog park that could go where a sports field does not fit, or that would be a great solution. There's lots of green space, but it's just I feel strongly, and I'm trying to represent other people too, to say that let's not put the safety of our children and community members or a group of dogs over a group of dogs being able to run freely without a leash. So those are all my prepared comments today. I just wanted to thank everybody for your time and consideration. And I'm not sure if you guys ask questions or if it's just I share the written statement and that's it.
Thank you, Jen, for your input. Unfortunately, the council or commission is not allowed to provide comments, but we do appreciate your feedback.
Okay, thank you so much, then.
If you would like to stay on, we can't comment directly to what you have shared. However, agenda items number 6 and 5 will directly relate to the needs of our Parks and Recreation, as well as our Regional Park Master Plan, which is the area of land that you've been discussing. So feel free to stay on if you'd like to hear some more information. Number 5 is the review of the survey that was released in March of 2021, so that's this year. You guys are currently getting a printout of a PowerPoint that just summarizes some of this data as well as some previous data. I do want to bring everybody's attention to a printout prior to what you're just receiving. It looks like this. It has the actual survey results that pertain to Parks and Recreation. Excuse me, the survey was shared with the community through multiple platforms. There was 1,137 Polk City residents that completed the survey. Specifically, questions number 9 and 10 related to Parks and Recreation. Survey question number 9 asked how satisfied they were with current Parks and Recreation programming that is being offered. That's also the graph that's in the PowerPoint that you were given. There was 16.5% of people who were very satisfied. 39% of people were satisfied. Almost 29% of people were neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. 13% were dissatisfied, and about 2 1/3% were very dissatisfied. So currently, the majority of Polk City is on the upside of our current Parks and Rec programming, so I thought that was good. Lots of comments were offered in question 10, again, specifically asking for open response comments on Parks and Recreation in Polk City. There is a summary available online in the Polk City website if you're interested. However, what we have right here in front of us, both of them say the exact same thing, has question 10 coded out into specific topics that were mentioned. So the top 10 things that were mentioned was a pool or aquatic center, splash pad, park playgrounds, trails, dog park, green space, baseball, softball, high-stressful trail connection, soccer fields, and shelter and shade. Then other comments are available on there too, including picnic tables, other sports, a rec center, amphitheater, lots of information on there. Ultimately, I think it's important to note that these two questions are not specifically about this recreation complex that is being discussed. This is a question about Parks and Rec as a whole. So the question was about what programming is being offered, what things people would like to see in the future, what things we've offered in the past. It was not a specific question to the land that the city has under contract with NAP. So as far as a Parks Board, I think this is really interesting data because it gives us kind of an outline of what our community is asking for out of Parks and Recreation. And I also think that it's a good driving piece of data for our new Parks and Rec director as to how to spend time, monies, and energies, what people are wanting to take and what they're wanting to engage in. So any discussion or questions about that?
I did have one question. Normally, when you get the results of a survey like this, it will tell you the breakdown of the ages of people who voted. And I'm wondering, do we have that breakdown?
We do not know. That was not a question that was included in the survey. We've taken that feedback, and I think in the future that will be a question. But without it being in there, that's not a parameter that we could code with other answers. So answer is no, but going forward, yes, that'll be a change that you'll be seeing on future surveys.
Do we have the neighborhood or location when it's
Unless they specifically put it in the notes, no, it was designed to be entirely anonymous.
okay? That's just one thing I was, yeah, I suppose that's difficult. Things like the playground piece, for example, just I was wondering if that made a difference because I know we have some playgrounds, some areas that just haven't gotten the equipment in yet, and that seemed to move a lot on the survey from last year to this year. So I just thought it'd be interesting to know if those were people that were sitting close to those areas where we just haven't been able to get the space filled. Or
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. Lost
where
Lake.
you live, yeah. So that was where my mind was going with that, as well as the green space, kind of related to space, but also maybe just to development in town.
Do we know, and I know we don't have the current census data, what do we consider our population to see what kind of response rate we got either at a total survey level or at a question?
We're estimating somewhere between 5,500 and 6,000.
Thank you.
We know when has that been pushed back to September?
It was pushed back, and then it was put to after July 1, and then it was pushed back again to September.
Any other questions, comments, feedback?
I find it really interesting that the Pool Aquatic Center has more than double pretty much anything else. I don't remember the question was, were you able to just pick any of them, or did you only pick like 3 or 4, or what?
No, it was designed to be open-ended. Yep.
So you could click as many as you wanted?
Oh, there was no clicking. It was all enter your own text.
Oh, okay.
There was 350 characters or something like that allotted. And you could take as much space as you wanted to.
When we were designing the survey, we talked to some other communities, and one of the things that came back is not to lead that question. If you start putting in things like playgrounds or splash pads or whatever, it tends to lead the answers. Whereas if you left it open-ended, you might get an answer from a resident of something that nobody on the Parks Commission or in staff has even thought about. So that's why that was left that way, to kind of have the public be able to tell us, oh, this community I came from had some certain amenity that I haven't thought of.
Will you remind me, we used an outside firm to do this? Is
We
that
did not.
correct? Okay.
Our city manager, with the help of all the department heads, created it basically. And the plan will be that we'll be doing it, I believe, every 2 years. Do not quote me on that. I know annually is too much, but I want to say it's every 2 years. And that's one of the things we want to talk about is demographics as far as age, those kinds of things.
Any other questions? Dialogue? All right, we're gonna move on to item number 6, which is an update on the regional park master plan. Again, going back to the handout that Jenny just gave you, that's color printed. I did have a couple of community members reach out to me asking about the history of the recreation complexes that have been proposed. I think some of this has to do with just having an influx of population in the last 5 years, that there's some folks that were unsure what had been talked about, only because since this is being talked about now, they've heard from other people, oh, well, this happened in the past. I do not have as much knowledge as a lot of you do up here on this, so please chime in at any point in time. But very briefly, what I found in the archives was in 2011, there was a plan proposed for the city to purchase 28.5 acres from Knapp Properties and to place 4 soccer fields that were 19 U-size soccer fields that could be used for multiple ages, 2 softball fields and 2 baseball fields in on the north side of the road that is Vista. The plan did not move forward because the bond vote failed. And then in 2015, with feedback from the population of Polk City, they added a swimming pool to the complex and removed the softball baseball fields, and instead was going to invest in renovating the existing sports complex. But both plans also included trail connections. And the vote in 2015 also failed, which is why it did not move forward. The current property that is under proposal that we're talking about tonight with the master plan is under contract, but it has not been purchased yet. So I think that's important to note that the city council actually still has one more reading of the rezoning of that area before the city actually owns this land and can develop it. So we are in a very early stage of this master parks plan. And just for everybody's refresher, if you turn to this page right here, the page that has 4 on it, round 1 of Confluence's concepts came back in March, and these were the 4 concepts that were proposed. The one concept that had the most support from stakeholders that were involved was the largest concept, with the understanding that we wanted more storage as well as the trail to be rerouted around the fields. And there was interest in adding a dog park. So that's what Confluence went back with to look at. So then if you flip over the next page, these are the 2 new concepts that Confluence came back with. The first concept map says concept 2.1. That's because it's second round, first concept that they gave us. You'll note that this one has 3 softball fields instead of 4. The baseball fields remain relatively unchanged. And then the soccer fields are a little bit changed as far as their location. But they're about the same number of fields. There's a 12U field added to the second concept map, or to the first concept map of the second round. And then where the softball field was placed, there is a community space proposed that could be used for pickleball, bocce ball, and other community passive recreation that would be there. I think it's important to note on this map just how much parking there is. There's almost 800, or there's over 800 parking spaces allotted for different use. There's also a community building that would be able to be used as an open meeting space, hosting graduation parties, that also has an outdoor seating area available. The trail does go around the perimeter of the park, and you'll note that the trailhead is an open green space that has its own parking lot that is very purposefully set aside from the other spaces in the hopes that the parking for the trailhead will be utilized for cyclists, not for those who are using this community park for other activities. Any questions about concept one? So concept 2 then, that Confluence gave us, it says concept 2.2. This one does not have the 8U soccer fields. It still has the two 12U soccer fields. But the biggest notable differences here is that there is a dog park in the southeast corner for small, and then a second dog park for larger dogs. And then there is a fourth softball field instead of having passive recreation like bocce ball or pickleball, tennis, whatever happens to go into that green space for Parks and Rec. Again, there is 650 parking spots with the trailhead parking being separated from the rest. Both plans have space for natural plantings with an emphasis of either wildflowers or a specific butterfly garden. Both plans have a splash pad and a play space allotted for children's use and a small community building. So those were the two plans that we got from Confluence for the second round after they had our feedback. Questions on either one of them? So if we keep going, in red, it says concept 2.1 discussion. I want to make very clear the changes on this map are mine. They are not from Confluence. I just wanted people to be able to visualize what I suggested as a representative of parks. So it's really hard to be there because my job was to represent parks, even though I have kids that play these sports. And so I was going off of some of the data that we have about community wants and needs about parks. And so I made the suggestion to move the 12U fields where the 8U fields are and to replace where the 12U fields were as a dog park. And I was very quickly told by people from Confluence that that was a really bad idea. Which is fine. I just wanted to have complete transparency with everybody what I had said on the behalf of the commission. They said putting the dog park in the front of the park is not attractive and just not the best spot for it. So that idea was quickly scrapped. So if we want to go one more page to the very back, it's in purple and it says concept blended discussion. We had a really hard time coming to consensus because there was competing interests and needs that were discussed. And so this kind of blends the two different parks. Again, I want to make clear that this is my rendition. This is not from Confluence. I've taken elements from each of the maps and blended them together. But one of the suggestions that was made was potentially moving the maintenance shed for soccer to the other side of baseball, or putting the dog park behind the baseball fields. But the biggest thing that I want to point out here is that for the 19U soccer fields, there was 50 feet between each of the fields. And this particular concept that I'm showing right now squishes those fields together. So now there's only about 20 feet between the fields. So the big thing with this land that they kept telling us over and over again is that you'll notice that the concepts are almost tiered. The top tier is where the 19U soccer fields are and the two baseball fields, and then there would be almost a tier or a large hill where they would have to do grading because this land is very hilly. And then there's almost like a second terrace that has parking, 12U fields, parking spaces, and then the baseball field. And then there would be a third level that has the softball fields, the ponds, and the splash pad play space community building. And so we could squish them east to west. We cannot squish north to south, if that makes sense. And so what I've done on this map too is I've taken out that fourth softball field and put back in the passive recreation of pickleball, bocce ball, green space. And then left the dog parks where they were in the second concept, where they would be kind of near that detention area and a little bit further removed from the parking and entrance to the park, so that there is not a ton of dogs right as you go into this space and where people are getting out of their cars and back into their cars with little kids. So again, this is just my rendering so people could visualize what we had pointed out while we were talking. But that's kind of what we discussed. At this point right now, we are waiting for Confluence to come back with new drawings. So we will have round 3 of drawings. That's where we are. Questions? I'd really love everybody's feedback, because when I'm in these meetings, it's really hard to be without everyone's input. So I'd love whatever input anybody has.
I really like some of the features of the blended one. When I looked at this, I kind of thought, like, why couldn't the dog park area remain over here and the butterfly garden go where the wildflowers are? Things like that. I think it gives a great overall for the whole community. And just some thoughts that I've had with it is, you know, these survey results are great, and just how do we prioritize, no matter what it is, if it is a dog park over a baseball field or a soccer field or pickleball and all of that. And we are a dog owner, love our dog, we take him all over the place, but I have been in that parking lot at the soccer complex the last however many Saturdays and multiple nights, and every time I have been in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, there is something. 3 weeks ago, there was an elderly gentleman. It was noon, and he got dropped off by the handicapped spots, and I thought he was going to a soccer field. There were 2 lanes of traffic trying to get in and out of there, and he was hobbling to the far field. So they dropped him off there because they couldn't get back there. I saw him almost get hit 3 times. A car went around me while someone was backing out and over here. It is crazy dangerous. So, I mean, we have to put that as a priority. And, I mean, I think this does a great job of meeting all of those needs.
So do you think the blended one that we're, I think that's what you're looking at, right? Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you feel like that meets those needs that you're talking about?
Yeah, and I mean, I think like the concept 2.1 is really good, but with it not having the dog park in there, if that is a high need, if that brings it in, and, you know, when I looked at 2.2, I kind of thought, you know, like, I don't know if the changes to the fields needed to happen, just because I felt like that was the only thing really being added, but I might have missed that. But, you know, when you look at, like, the blended basically puts my thoughts of, when I look at 2.1, how could we fit all this in there? But, and, I mean, to go on the dog park thing too, it is a great opportunity, but we are surrounded by great opportunities if you want to take your dog other places with Jester and Big Creek and ledges and neighborhoods. It seems hard to prioritize that space for dogs when you can hop out anywhere with your dog, but you cannot hop out anywhere with kids participating in these.
In the Confluence design, have they determined that this is how many parking spaces we need for this size of a complex?
Yeah, we asked that exact
So there's
question.
no leeway on that parking number?
There is, they just said, especially looking at future use, if there ever is any sort of tournament access, or if there ever is, and Josh goes to these meetings as a representative for Little League, so you feel free to chime in at any point in time.
Ashley, if I may, when it comes to a park and parking, aim high. Because it's amazing how fast you will grow into that. So that's one of those things that you almost want to be a little bit more proactive on, and more parking's better than not.
But I think what's really important about how they have the parking laid out is you'll notice that there are parking lots that are basically allocated for each of the different uses of this particular community park. So there's one parking lot kind of for the far east side of the park. There's one parking lot that's near the community building splash pad, and then there's one parking lot that's closest to the soccer fields, and then there's a small parking lot near the trailhead.
Did the size of the community building come up, or were there any, was that, I just made a difference? on
So
that?
right now, because we're in very early phases of this, a lot of this is placeholders. So we don't actually have, the fields are to scale and the parking lots are roughly to scale. But how much space a splash pad takes up versus a playground versus the community building versus how big a pond is, for an example, all of those things we don't have exact answers to until they start the grading of the project, because that's going to drive a lot of that. They did mention, like, on the far southeast corner where it says detention pond, that might end up being an actual pond instead of just a detention area if they need to dig out further in order to terrace everything. So again, those are just things that we don't know. Same thing with the trail. On one, there's a bridge, and on the other, there's not. They mentioned that there might be no bridge on either one of them. There might be bridges on both of them. We won't know that until we get to the point where we're trying to figure out what is the needs in the space.
And the big thing to note about the ponds is they're all functional. They're all there because they're required for stormwater management. So although it would be easy for someone that's not familiar with that to look at it and say, well, just take out the ponds and put in more fields, that's not a possibility because you have to have the water retained because of all the homes that then are lower to what would be the south of that area.
In addition, we need that water out there for irrigation of the actual fields.
There is that too, yes.
I think it's a good hybrid of all the different amenities, both recreation and more passive uses that I think would appeal to a lot of people. But I agree, there's a lot that's getting crammed in here, and I think once you start really getting into the details of design, that we're going to find that some things maybe have to adjust or be sacrificed. So I don't know if we want to, at some point maybe prioritize things or figure out, what can and can't live without. It's just, I think there's a lot of details to be worked out yet.
I'd love to know that though, from like this commission, we had the exact same conversation. At some point in time, you're putting so much in this space that, it's not great for anyone. So, other than the history of the recreation complex, I know that Josh was on the board. I think Kelly, you were on the board, maybe not, I'm not sure, when there's been 2 dog parks proposed also that failed. So in both cases, it was because people didn't want it near their homes. So one of the advantages I see of including a dog park here is that there's clearly a want for it around town, but if it's put here, it's there. It's not being added to a park.
You're avoiding all the NIMBYism.
I mean, not that someone's not going to complain about it, that buys those lots that back up to it, but it's in the
But as
plan
an
and
existing
communicated.
feature, it's harder to argue with that.
Right.
It's not in somebody's backyard currently. Like someday it will be, but that person should, once this plan is finalized, be aware that that's a potential when they purchase that lot. So it's probably harder to go in and put a dog park in an already established neighborhood.
It is. It's been tried.
My only concern with that thought is just if we're using space here just for that reason when it could be used for something else that would better benefit our needs right now.
So talk me through that. What do you think that looks like? Or, and you can
Well,
put your
if
thoughts
it-
together.
right.
I'm not trying to put anybody
I
on
mean,
the
more
spot.
just like if it, like I look at this area where it is proposed right now, that probably isn't really a usable area for a field or a ball or, you know, anything like that. So like that area fits to me that you could stick that there, but when you move it over to where the soccer fields are or a baseball softball area, that is taking away a need that it could be somewhere else on the line. And I don't think it's worth saying you can put it here because people won't complain. They know it's going to be there when they move in. That I don't think we should do that in a usable space for something else just to get it somewhere in our.
I think I mentioned this at maybe our last meeting or else in some comments, but I did hear from a few people about pickleball, and that pickleball can basically exist on a tennis court with some restriping. And we do have tennis courts in town. I don't know how many we have it's Miller Park, right?
Two.
We have 2. Can you repurpose a tennis court into a pickleball court also, so that depending on what you want to do there, whether it's tennis or pickleball,
Sure.
the lines would be there?
Excuse me. So what a lot of communities have been doing with the exact setup we have at Miller with 2, you can put 4 pickleball courts on a singular tennis court, 2 and 2. If you wanted to not, repave and do all that kind of stuff, there are also communities that will put blended lines using the existing tennis net. And up there at Miller, one of them has been done. So we've got sport court that's over the actual paved portion because of cracking and the cost of fixing that. And I think that's been
Several years ago.
it's been a long time since that's been there. But anywho, so yes, you can blend on that. The only thing that causes a problem is pickleball and tennis. They don't play real nice with each other. So if you were to ever get USTA grant funding, it would just have to be tennis. They are not cool with the blended lines. And I need to look into it a little bit more, but those tennis courts up there were grant funded. I would have to look back and get a lot more knowledgeable about the actual details of how long that grant, if there was a sunset and then we can manipulate things, or if it is what it is, kind of thing. Sorry, that was long-winded, Steve, but.
It's a great question. I'm almost sure that we had equipped that for pickleball, because I remember way back, I don't know if Josh was on at that time, but there was somebody that came in specifically, a couple that came in and really advocated for pickleball, and my understanding was we had equipped those and striped them.
Yeah, one of them is striped. I think
so
Public
there's
Works.
options to do, so if it has been, that was my understanding.
Do we know how widely utilized those 2 courts are being used right now?
I certainly see some people. I don't think anybody's waiting in line before them, to put it nicely.
We go to that park quite a bit, about 50 people, if not, there's playing tennis.
I've heard a lot of teenagers meet there to play, but I don't know adult-wise.
It's usually.
That'd be a good future question on the survey. Like in the last 30 days, I have what facilities they've used or something like that.
Anybody else?
I think my comments are similar to Monica's, that I really appreciate the effort at having a more balanced approach to it. And that from a Parks and Recreation standpoint, it's a lot of Jason's growing program, trying to handle those conflicting things. I am curious, what we're hearing over and over is that there's just needs that can't be met here. and the most pressing are with the youth sports teams. Are there other conversations that are taking place, or that like it's just the city? How do you continue that conversation, or is there more to that plan? Or what happens next? Do you just say we
The
can't?
staging approach, I'm sorry. So
Yeah, I think I'm just
what's-
curious, if you get to the end of this and you're still short fields, how do you continue those conversations, or can continue? Maybe it's just putting a bookmark in it for later.
Well, there's never gonna be enough,
Mhm.
I think is the point. And our existing facility, along with the future facility, when we tried to do the bonds the last two times, I was part of that, and it was, we still got 30%, which was not even close, right? So I think that, I may or may not be answering your question, I think we'll get to it. But the more diverse we can be, I'm not saying it's going for bond, I'm not saying that at all, but if we're thinking about wanting to get this done fairly quickly and not phasing it in, which a phase-in approach may be the way we need to do it. You look at fields first, because the green space is really to develop and get going, right? But to your point, I think to add future, it's going to have to just continue to be looking at what other areas are available to add new green space and then have one centralized. This would maybe be the marquee area of Polk City with whichever you pick as far as, the 19. And I know it's a nightmare down there, and I went through it with my kids. It's gotten way worse, I'm sure, if it could. I mean, I don't even possibly could get any worse than it was, but it's been that way for so doggone long and needed this for so. And so I think the important part is to get that grassroots established for the plan to accommodate as many different demographics of this community as we can to get the support needed, because focusing specifically on one or two aspects has not worked. I don't think it will. But I think the green spaces probably be that we need to, that you guys have certainly identified that. And that connection to High Trestle Trail. I mean, without that trail going through, so that would probably be a phase something, depending on how they would phase it in. But I think we need to continuously be open to green space opportunities, no matter where it is, and look to acquire or plan around that as we work. So it doesn't stop here. We're not going to get any smaller. We're going to continue to bring the 40-year-olds in that have 2 or 3 kids, and we'll keep cycling that through. So there's been a need for a long time. That's also a long answer, but I think just as a reminder that we'll continue to look at that. It's been important since I've started on the council 11, 12 years ago. It was almost the exact same conversation, if you will. So we need to just get out of the box a bit and figure out. Now we have 52 acres, which we never had before. We had half of that to work before. So now we have twice the amount, and we can really do some really fun things with that. So long answer to your question, Amy, but very good.
So on the very end of the blended concept, you'll see that there's approximate allotted land use. This particular proposal, and again, everything on this is placeholders. None of it is set in stone. But it's about a quarter soccer, a quarter baseball, a quarter softball, and then a quarter community, whether that be nature, trail, dog park, green space, gardens. Nick, Josh, you want to chime in anything?
I do have some thoughts about squishing the U19 fields together, just functionally not having space between them for spectators, for being able to stop play between 2 fields as balls go out of bounds. Nothing more unnerving than being in the middle of your match and suddenly ball comes careening in from Lord knows where. So thoughts on that. I'm not sure how I feel about softball also losing another field. But I also really want like a usable green space out there as well. So I'm conflicted because we're trying to wear a whole lot of hats here and trying to do so much stuff that I'm afraid nobody's going to be happy, and I mean that's something we're going to have to live with either way, because some needs are being met no matter what the site ends up looking like. So yes, I don't have any useful input, but I have thoughts and feelings about it. So
Your feelings matter, Nick.
I appreciate that. I like feeling out.
So the gap between the fields would be similar to Grimes, if you've been out to
I
Grimes.
have been out of Grimes, and I feel very much the same way about their field setup. It's a lot of stuff crammed into a little area, and there's lots of people every which way, and it's confusing and gets interrupted, but it does function. So
I'm about to ask you a question, and you feel free to say I'm not prepared to answer it.
shoot.
Would you prefer to keep the space between the 19U fields and get rid of the 8U fields? Or
I am
keep
prepared to answer that by saying that I think getting rid of the 12U fields is actually the smarter move. The
Tell me about
12U
that.
fields can go easily onto the 19 fields with striping.
Okay.
You can accommodate your two 12U games in the same space as one U19 field going on at the same time if you don't have that kind of scheduling conflict.
Okay.
But being able to move around all those U8 goals, and I would keep the U8 stuff.
Okay.
In addition to the soccer club's other partners all around town, we've got other places that we could probably set up for U12 exclusively.
Okay.
I think the good thing with soccer though too is that they can repaint lines to fit that
Yes.
space too. So if, they thought 8U fields would fit better where the 12U fields are, or like just to, if they wanted more space up top to have the 19U and 12 through them, and maybe there's just one, just an 8U field the other direction or something, and then down here.
So when I look at this, something that just sticks out to me is this pickleball, bocce ball, green space stuck right in a space where it looks like there should be a softball field. So if Nick is suggesting that the 12U fields could be moved, maybe that opens up an opportunity to move the green space around somehow and put a softball field back there, or in that spot.
I don't have any answers for either you or Nick, but I can definitely ask Confluence, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for your guys' book, so I will get that.
Josh, do you think that another softball field there is necessary, or how would you prioritize that on that end? With what we have at the other complex and what is here?
So, speaking as Polk City Little League, speaking as Polk City Little League, and speaking for Polk City United, we walked away from the last meeting thinking concept 2.1 was the way to go. Speaking as a Parks Commission member, we need to find the balance of getting as much in there without squeezing it too much. Confluence was very clear as saying the more you put in it, the more cluttered it's gonna be and the less you're gonna like it. And so, as a commission member, you know, I think squeezing in anything more into that is gonna be too much. I think we need to find other opportunities, whether it's a dog park or whatever, to find it someplace else. The concept 2.1 did put the dog park in the outfield of that baseball field. I get that'll be placed in there before any houses gets platted, but the moment they do, those housing values are gonna probably be impacted by a dog park for the long term potentially, as well as the city receiving plenty of phone calls of complaints about it, whether the city skipped one day with cleaning up the dog crap and now it smells. Parents complaining about the dog park right around a ball field and dogs chasing and running up and down with kids right there. What the right answer is, I don't know. You know, some conversations I've had with Greg with soccer is utilizing these fields for most of the time being for competition only, and then utilizing existing fields for practices, knowing that there's still going to be some practices here, probably for the older kids. The high school and middle school is in huge needs of fields. They've got one baseball field, one softball field for 7th grade through varsity, baseball and softball. You know, there's opportunities to share those fields, just like the ghost fields that were on the school property across the street. Those opportunities are in there. The city's going to continue to grow. I mean, we're already looking at, 5,500 to 6,000 people now. That's going to continue to grow. If the population stays 36, theoretically they're going to have kids. Even if half those kids play sports, that's going to be impacted. But whether this went live and, council approved it last night, we're still a few years away from this actually coming live. I wouldn't squeeze any more in. I think if we squeeze much more in, it's going to get too cluttered and people are going to be stepping all over themselves. I think this gives us a good balance of what's on the list. I know, Ashley, you went through what happened in the first 2 failed attempts. First attempt did not have a swimming pool, and there was a very large contingent of people who said, basically had signs, no pool, no vote. And it failed. Second time we put a pool in there, the cost of it was very, very high. And there were signs all over, pool, no vote. I mean, it was the exact opposite. And so I think it's kind of hard to compare this history with what this is, kind of for that reason. Now, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to want a swimming pool. And I'm hopeful that putting in the splash pad, I think that needs to be there, because I'm hoping that might be enough to sway some of those and get some of that balance in there. But to answer your question, from the Polk City Little League side, if it was a matter of losing one softball field to gain support for the rest of the commission, we'd be willing to do it. I don't want to see soccer lose any more field space. I wouldn't want to see Little League lose any more field space. But I also don't know if we want to necessarily squeeze every little thing in there just to say we've got it.
So would you, just so I understand fully, would you prefer sticking with 2.1 or would you prefer the blended?
I would prefer 2.1.
2.1, okay.
Well, and when looking at where the dog parks are with the blended, definitely still have that same problem with your parking where all those people are and walking past a bunch of people with your dog to get over there.
Do we know what percentage, and I don't know if this is a Little League question or if this is a town question or a United question, I don't know. Do we know what percentage of the town participates in those activities?
We had that information in 2015, but I don't know that we have a good number today. I mean, the clubs may, but I know kind of the rule of thumb back, 5 years ago was you wanted to have, I think it was 60% of the kids to be in the Polk city limits. I can only assume that that is still the case, just because out of everybody. So I know soccer 4 or 5 years ago had, I don't know, 440 kids. And it was that roughly 60% of those 400 kids were from Polk City. But my daughter has graduated since then, and I'm just not familiar with what this, but I would assume since North Polk is still pretty much the same as percentage from Polk City and the other communities that are part of North Polk, that the soccer would be the same way. Now, Little League's a little different because Little League, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but when my son played, there was Little League in Elkhart and there was Little League in Sheldon, separate from the Little League here in Polk City. Is that still the case?
It is. So all of my numbers, I'm trying to pull them up, my site will work, are Polk City residents. Some of them are kind of on that, technically have an Ankeny address, but are just right outside, but 99% are gonna be a Polk City address or, be just in the rural. And for whatever reason, it's not working. Maybe it is.
Whereas the soccer
Yeah,
is
expansion.
actually is for the
You might
whole
be able to go
district.
a little bit, yeah.
Plus the United.
United, correct. And then United, 3 years ago, added a competitive level. So it's still, North Polk kids, but it's different than the rec piece. And that's part of the drive. I mean, I'm not part of but I have a lot of friends that have kids, and 12U and 14U both won the championship down at County this last weekend. So they're developing, my daughter came out of that program and now she plays at the collegiate level. One of the challenges that we have is with us having both rec and competitive. My daughter played competitive elsewhere because we didn't have it here. And those agencies, organizations, they create their own field space at the competitive level. So BSA, Ankeny, Rush, Sporting West, they've all, the competitive side has invested in buying land and creating fields, so it's actually called whatever that competitive level is. It's their soccer fields. They don't share with the city, they don't share with the school. Now I'm sure you can rent field space or whatnot. They do things just a little differently, whereas like many things in Polk City, we're just a little farther behind the curve, and so we're just starting to get into that competitive world. So I don't know what that'll look like. Kind of to your question before, Amy, I don't know what that'll look like for United. They have one competitive team per age group, is that right?
So yes,
3 per level. So
There's just three.
3 total.
teams right now.
Right, so there's 12U, 14U, and then whatever the other age is, which is very different.
Well, I should say this spring there's 3 this spring.
Okay.
There's 4 in the fall.
So the program hasn't grown to the same level as those other organizations.
But
I
they're also
mentioned.
different in that Rush and VSA, they have paid coaches and they cost
Correct.
a lot more than North Polk United.
I still, based on what I know of North Polk, I still envision us being able to get to that level, just because of the drive and the desire for that here in our town.
Thank you.
But to your point, they are very successful programs. I mean, at the high school level, it's been very successful.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
and it all starts with these youth sports. I mean, our baseball team's been to state, softball team's been to state, I don't know how many times over the years. Soccer has just grown huge and is highly competitive. And so, to keep those strong, talented kids in our district, having nice field space and people wanting to come to us or wanting to play those teams, whether it's in a friendly or in a tournament, they're not going to come and play on our field.
So I have an ignorant question. My oldest soccer player is 7, so I know nothing about what anybody's talking about right now. But is there, I didn't know that, I mean, I guess I should have figured out that United wasn't all Polk City kids, but are there also fields in Elkhart and Alleman and stuff that people use?
We use the high school's field for U19 play,
Okay.
especially when they're trying to have nice friendlies with outside teams.
And prior to the development of some of that space to the south of the Central Elementary, there were fields there that were used a few years ago, but then they developed that into practice.
Tennis courts down there.
There's tennis courts, and then there's practice football,
Yep.
marching band, that kind of stuff is also there, since the high school field is turf.
And on the rec side, at the younger level, like 8U, for example, we have partnered with other communities to have games, and there have been many years where most of those games are in Grimes, or we go to Adel because we don't have field space available in the city.
Are there fields in Elkhart or Alleman where those kids are coming from?
And I would say there's not a large number. I mean, they're North Polk kids, but most of the kids participating, large majority are.
So we're not sure if it's at 60% still.
No, I wouldn't be able to speak to that.
We could definitely get those numbers from them.
So I think that's significant and important, at least coming from like the park side of thing. I mean, if this is community land for Polk City, I mean, I am on the same page as you guys. Like there is a safety issue in the current complex, and those fields are overused, and but I think it's important as we look at these numbers and this data, that demographic piece that you're talking about, Steve, is a big missing piece. If we have, if only 60% of the kids on United that are playing soccer on those fields are from Polk City, I feel more comfortable maybe advocating for that and saying, well, let's tap into Alleman, let's tap into Elkhart. Are there some other community spaces that we can use for soccer games? Or do we squeeze and then later, we've got green space allotted here. Can we reuse that space at a different time? I don't know any of those answers, but I do think that there is some unanswered questions out there. So the one thing that we haven't really talked about is Nick mentioned the idea of instead of doing away with the 8U fields, Nick mentioned instead of squeezing the 19U fields together, like I have in this blended map, keeping that space between those fields and then filling that 12U space with the concession stand and 8U fields. Is there any comment on that or input, ideas?
Are the 19U and 12U fields used at the same time typically? Or would we be able to take away 19 to use for 12? I don't know anything about soccer.
I don't know either.
So that's just me.
On a Saturday morning, I would bet that if we've got these 3 fields and our 2 ghost fields that we're imagining over on the for elementary, I can't imagine that all 5 U19 fields would be in use at the same time.
In the current structure, but you host a tournament or something like
Yes,
that.
exactly, and
then
that changes.
Then that changes.
But hosting a tournament that's going to use the U19 and a tournament that's going to be 12 size field at the same time is not something that I imagine they would do.
And one of the challenges you'll see if you're not familiar with soccer, and I doubt it's changed, but the soccer leagues are pigeonholed into games being at certain times. So like the sports complex, it's very busy from say 8 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. There's nobody else. And a lot of that has to do with the league that soccer's part of. I think Little League's the same way. You get a schedule that says you play during these 4 hours of the day, and maybe because of weather, hot, cold, whatever. But that's the other challenge, is you can't, if you have 15 games to play, you have to fit them all in this block of time. You can't spread them out from morning until dusk. And that's the challenge too, is so you're creating parking, right? That's the issue with our current space. There's enough fields for people to play on. They're playing on them. It's just one team gets over, they do pictures or team meeting or whatever, but the other team has to be there half an hour before to warm up or 45 minutes before to warm up. That's when you have the parking problem. So when Jason says park space, aim high, that's why. It's not because there's not enough fields. It's the fact that coming and the going of the transportation of those kiddos, you know, who knows, maybe some kiddo has 3 cars there to watch him for that particular game or her. That's your challenge, is making sure you have enough parking for the fields that you've got for that overlap.
And your comment reminded me, like, there is tight schedules and they are really busy, but then these fields will be open at hours of the day. And so you can take your family and you have a large green space that you can run around and do any activity that you want to do. Or if you want to have a family or neighborhood gathering and play baseball or softball when that's available. Like, it's not just for the sports clubs. Like, any of us could go run around on a soccer field when they're not being utilized.
As long as everybody's taking care of the fields.
Right, yeah. Don't drive on it and things like that, but it's
Please
not
don't
like
drive on the field.
They're not locked and
Just, I mean, maybe understanding more about time constraints versus the parking needs too, knowing that that's kind of a hot topic with people at the existing facility, just to understand, you know, kind of, hey, we have this many parking stalls, but realistically, on an average hour during this block of time, you're gonna have X number of people utilizing the field, you know, and then just, it might help just ease people's minds a little bit too about parking. I'm sure they have enough.
Any other feedback on keeping the 12U versus the 8U?
So in the concept 2.1, we've got the 8U fields stacked 4 high next to that field. And I think that's fine. The actual club, who I don't actually speak for, might feel differently. But I think that's fine, and I think getting rid of the 12U fields as they sit in this concept does open up more community space, does open up more non-sports league. And I mean, even if it is just green space and it is relatively flat green space, that's something that can be used for soccer at some point in time too. I would just guess that would be the forward priorities.
Okay. Anything else? So what I'm hearing, just to summarize, as I go back to Confluence again, we'd like to have some conversations around a preference for some sort of blended concept. And again, I know that this is not perfect, but I'm a science teacher, not a graphic designer, so you get what you get. But I hear Josh's comments about 2.1. I've heard other comments about preferring kind of the blended model, knowing that one of the problems is just how much is being squeezed into this allotted acres. Does anybody else have a definitive preference for one of these concepts?
Can I ask one more question on
Yeah,
the difference
100%.
between the- so the path throughout 2.1 isn't, all of that is not on the blended one, but I see that as a nice perk. So I don't know if that is just something that kind of was
That probably got deleted as
Okay.
I was taking
Right, okay.
screenshots, to be honest with you. One thing I know Confluence was trying really hard to do is to create a track-like loop around the pond that has mile markers on it so that people can use that as an exercising walking path.
Okay, well, yeah, I was just gonna say, I really like that that would be an opportunity for everyone to have more uninterrupted space to walk through, so.
So no one else has any particular preference that they want to state? And you can email me too if you want to digest it a hot bit and get back to me or whatever the case may be. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Otherwise, we'll put this to bed. All right, well, if you have any feedback from the public and you want to share that, that would be awesome so that we can be as informed as possible about community needs. Number 7 is Jason is going to review the 2021 sponsorship campaign.
Yeah, so this is something that the library director and myself decided to do in tandem, and this is going to be a once a year thing. We know we have limited commercial or folks here in town, and they get hit up quite a bit. So we wanted to do something that was respectful of them, and it's kind of a once a year letter that we're sending to those folks, just asking for sponsorship opportunities in that year. And so we did just finish getting sponsorships for the 2021, and we've got some really generous companies here in town in the surrounding areas. So as you can see, the library and I tried to keep it pretty parallel. We both offered 3 levels of such. For mine, it was a Movies in the Park sponsorship that goes toward the licensing to show a movie in a public space. My silver was called Let the Kids Play. We're looking to be able to offer free activities at special events throughout. So think face painting, pumpkin carving, things like that. And then the last one is yoga in the park. So that would pay for a yoga instructor to teach a no-cost hour-long in our parks. So yeah, mine has come to a finish, and I have 11 donors, totaling $2,100. I have 5 gold sponsors, 3 silver, and 3 bronze. So we're looking at 5 movies in the upcoming month. So pretty excited about that. And I just wanted to give a shout out to those 11. So North Polk Family Medicine, Polk City Fairway, First Continental Group, Iowa Chiropractic Clinic, Curry Engineering Associates, Ankeny Sanitation, Luana Savings Bank, Cornerstone Dental, Polk City Veterinary Hospital, Guernsey Electric, and Mid-American Energy. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Any update on Friends of Polk City? Not yet.
Nothing new to report.
Okay. Thank you very much. Number 8 is reports and particulars. We have already taken up quite a bit of your time. Mr. Tree Guy, can we get an update from you?
I don't really have any report. I just haven't been to a meeting for a long time because I don't Zoom. So nice to be here again. Jason's been giving you updates on things that have been going on with the tree report. If you have any questions, I'll answer. I don't really have any report.
All right.
Welcome back.
I think you've been
Nice to be here.
missed.
Hey, I actually saw Ken report the other day to the council, and he had mentioned there is now an Arbor League Facebook page.
We do have an Arbor Facebook page. I no thanks to me on that deal either. I don't do Facebook, but we do have an Arbor Facebook page. It's really, really nice. Thanks to Teresa McCombs for doing that.
Yep. So if anybody is interested in joining Ken's efforts,
We're on the grow. We for years we've talked about needing new blood, new people. I'm getting old and getting some new blood and some new people, and we're on the grow.
awesome. Thank you so much, Ken.
Thank you.
Dave, anything from you?
I just want to I'm glad we're all here together, you know, in the same area now. It's a lot easier to look people in the eye and really see what they really think. And also everybody's efforts on this master plan for this park. This stuff is not easy, and been through way too many times without it coming to fruition. But what we were always banking on at that point was that we had the land, that we were buying land. Now we have the land. I mean, we're essentially a week away from having the land, right? For the third reading. So that is the foundation by which we can build everything else. And when I looked at the surveys, I seen that 64% of people were not in favor of increasing taxes. So we have to also consider how this will move forward, because it's just really hard to get a vote. And you guys are doing a great job of looking at the diversity of this community. And when I was on the last 2 months, I was pretty tunnel vision myself on this, because I had certain things that it was in the community, and it was, you know, some of the things that I was just most exposed to. But the important part, I think, is what you guys are talking about, is what are others, you know, Josh mentioned the community area, the splash pad, right? It's to let's get more support, and what can we do? The trail will be a huge piece of this. We've been talking about that connection for such a long time. So if we're able to, that's another, you know, features and benefits. And you guys know what you're doing, and just wanted to thank you from the council's perspective. It's not easy. We're going through a facilities need assessment right now, which is equally hard because it's millions and millions of dollars. And so it's like, okay, phasing. What's first, what's second, what's third? And so we're all going through it, but thank you guys for all your time and effort.
Anything else from the commission?
I did just want to add that the Community Visioning Implementation Committee had its second and final official implementation committee meeting. And the result of that meeting, and Monica may want to chime in too, but the result of that meeting is we put together timetables for our 4 main areas, which are trailhead, wayfinding signage, community beautification murals, and community beautification amenities, plantings, and other. So we're moving forward, and we had some big challenges ahead of us, but our group is excited about it.
Thank you for that report. Anything else from any of the other commission members?
Jason, can you give us a quick update on registrations for summer programming?
Yeah, it's looking quite good. Some of them have filled the preschool programs, the Start Smart. Those have the evenings are close to filling. I offered a morning and an afternoon to kind of gauge the interest of what Polk City parents would prefer. And yeah, overwhelmingly it's the afternoon. So going forward, we'll know about that. And then with the former summer rec program that's now kind of changed a little bit, every age group will have 2 sessions, and session 1 is very close to being full across the board, and then session 2 is lagging just a little behind. So.
All right, last call. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn? Oh,
Sorry, I won't. I have just a few things.
oh, sorry.
That's
Just
okay.
kidding. Staff, I forgot to say staff.
After a 1-year hiatus, I'm working with Principal Richards at the middle school. We're going to do the 8th grade community service day. So that's slated for Wednesday the 26th. They're bringing an army of 150 8th graders. So I'm working with Public Works to have, a good array of projects that they will, their volunteerism really helps us, hammer out some of those things in a day that would probably take staff, well, more than a day. We'll put it that way. So I'm excited to be able to do that this year. Last week I met with Tyler Stubbs. He's a fisheries biologist with the DNR, specifically talking about the ponds at 12 Oaks and Marina Cove. It was really some good information, and he is slated, he's probably going to speak to you guys in July. the reason for the delay, they want to get a snapshot of how the fish population is doing in both of those. So they're going to come out and electroshock before they talk to you, so they can really give you a picture of what's going on there. So he's been telling me we'll definitely put some publicity out there. I think a lot of folks might come to like watch when they put that wand in the water and then all the fish float up momentarily. It's a pretty wild scene. So he will report.
What? That's a real thing?
Yeah.
It doesn't kill them?
No.
That's awesome.
You're gonna watch.
But no, based on
I am
how
100% gonna watch.
based on how the
We should
fish
have like
population-
popsicles in the park with the commission. So yeah, just kidding.
No, that's not a bad idea. So more coming on that. We know that we've got an algae problem, and he'll better explain exactly why these ponds are so prone to that problem year after year. And the last piece is on the west side of the square. We've got a silver maple. It's one of the more mature trees on the square. It's been cabled for Ken over a decade. Yeah. No. So after the derecho, we had some firms come in and kind of take the health of the square, since that was really what got hammered, and that's been labeled as a tree of concern for a while. So what really kind of spurred this process is on the trunk, we're seeing a lot more evidence of rot on the trunk. So if your base is rotting and you've got that much mass above it, it's a problem tree. So we are removing that tree from the square. That's supposed to happen the first part of May, depending on weather, obviously, with getting a contractor in here. But in response to that, I'm working closely with that guy back there to get some trees back in the square fast. And then we're looking to transplant a very mature tree in its place to provide shade a lot faster. So we're looking to spade in a very mature tree. That'll have to wait till the fall. That's kind of the next opportunity to spade a tree. But anyway, so.
Do we have any idea what kind of species we're planning on putting in there?
Right now we have a maple. I forget exactly the subspecies of it, but we do have one earmarked, just so we have one lined up. Trees overall are in a shortage all across America. So we've got one, but I'll rely on the expert back there to find the right tree for the square.
Well, besides the fact or the reasons why we're having a tree, I would have a heart attack.
It's a good
Seeing a
idea.
beloved tree.
If we have it, I think
We can do that.
the least amount of, maybe people want to watch it, but
Yeah.
it's a big tree. We've lost a lot of things. So, yeah, that would be
We can do
more
that.
communication better.
That's all
It's
I've
a big
got.
tree, but if we tell people that it's a tree that's rotting from the inside out, people have seen enough trees that have come down this last year that they understand when a tree is dangerous, it's going to have to go.
I beg to speak to that just real quick, Brian. That tree over there, I know that there's gonna be a lot of pushback from some people about taking that tree out. However, that tree, there are 3 cables up in, huge limbs up in the top, and I've done a lot of special contract work for the Corps of Engineers, and the Corps of Engineers never, ever, ever, ever leave a tree like that anywhere near any place where people hang, or a building. It's clearly a hazard tree, and once you put cables in, you've acknowledged the hazard of it. It's like putting up a sign that says beware the dog. All you've done is you've acknowledged it's dangerous, and probably should come down as soon as now. We're at that point where it's to happen.
And I also feel if the tree guy is advocating for a tree coming down,
The tree board, the whole tree board looked at that. It wasn't just my shoulders, but everybody. It's clearly a hazard where it's at. If it were out in timber, it's different. It's very serious where it's at.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Jason?
Nope, I'm done.
Anything from you, Jenny? All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion?
Second.
All right. Thank you. Our next board all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.